I would like to approach this from a slightly different perspective. I think our esteemed panel have really answered the questions that are in front of us, and I would just like to try and look at some of those issues from the point of view of the institutional investor. Now, one health warning, first of all. What I'm going to say is my personal view, but it has been informed by my experiences on the board of PRI, but also as a director of the trustee board of a large pension scheme. And I think that we have to remember what we're about as an institutional investor, as a pension fund. I and my colleagues have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the pensions of our beneficiaries are paid on time and we pay them the correct money. And in order to try and achieve that, we have to manage our assets in order to try and meet all of our liabilities, and that's a difficult process. And we are also, by definition, a long-term investor. Now, my particular pension scheme happens to be closed to new members. So the youngest member is probably of the age of round about 25 years old. But that does mean that the pension fund can reasonably expect the pension fund, or at the tail end, the insurance company that will take over the final payments, can reasonably expect to deliver pensions for at least the next 60 to 80 years. And so therefore we have to have a long-term perspective, and we have to have a distribution of assets that are not heavily exposed into one asset class or into one country. And therefore the long-term interests of the beneficiaries have to be allied to the long-term health and economic welfare of the world as a whole. And that's a major issue. And that therefore means that, by definition, in order for us to carry out our fiduciary responsibility, we really do have to be responsible investors. And by that, we then have to take account of all of the risks, including that environmental, social, and the governance risks. And the governance risks of companies and entities in which we invest do not get the governance right, or there is false reporting or whatever, then we are exposed to risk and to failure. And so therefore those measures that were outlined earlier this morning by Chairman Shang of the Securities Commission and this afternoon by Chairman Geng of Shanghai Stock Exchange, I think are incredibly important to try and build up the confidence of investors, because pension funds are very cautious investors. They have to be. We cannot gamble with the pensions of our beneficiaries. And therefore, when we move into new areas, into new asset classes, into developing countries, this is from the point of view of a Western investor, we have to go through a process of due diligence, and we have to be confident that those markets can sustain our investment, and we want to work with those markets. And so therefore the assurances and the reports and the very strong message from Chairman Shang and Geng today have been very positive, and I think we all recognise that. But I think the issue about behaviours, and that's what PRI is about, is about modifying investor behaviours. And what I'm saying is that we as investors should simply be looking at the companies in which we invest and say you should be doing better on ESG. But we as investors should actually be demonstrating that we are properly capable, responsible investors. And that's why I like the formulation that's coming through, and I think Rani put it very well when she described a hybrid approach between regulation and voluntary behaviours. And I like the formulation in one of the questions where it says, are you attracted by voluntary requirements? Now, to me a requirement is not voluntary, we have to do it, but I like that phraseology, voluntary requirement. And I think that actually is the way forward, because we have to strike a balance. There is always going to be a legitimate debate between what should be regulated, what should be legislated for, and what behaviours we should aspire to. And I think what we should be trying to do on a voluntary basis, if you take the voluntary side of it, is actually to raise the game and to increase the awareness. And I absolutely, totally agree with Rani when she says that there is no point in having a box-ticking approach where everything has to be spelt out and you have to comply with this, because we could end up producing 200 pages of detailed metrics that mean absolutely nothing and that nobody will ever read. What really is important, I believe, is for the institutional investors to build up a relationship with the companies and the organisations in which they invest, and that we work with the entities in which we invest, and that we also report back to our stakeholders. In my case, we should be reporting back to the pensioners, but I think we also increasingly should have an obligation to report back to society as a whole, because pension funds are still remarkably important institutions. They occupy a huge slice of the institutional investment in the world, and we therefore have a responsibility. So it's not just about shareholder rights, in my opinion, but it's also about shareholder responsibilities. We are owners, we should exercise accountability as owners, and we should also engage with the entities in which we have invested. I just want to finish by saying that one of the great achievements of PRI has been to ask our signatories, and it's the only thing that our signatories have to do, really, is to go through an annual assessment process, where they then have to measure up what they are actually doing as against what they simply say. And that's been an interesting process. Now, we're a pension fund. We are not in competition with anybody else, and therefore it's very easy for us to disclose. But we've taken the decision that we are now going to start disclosing our annual assessment from PRI, because we believe that our members are entitled to have that, and there is nothing wrong with society as a whole having access to that sort of information. We have a responsibility to society. Our benefits depend on the health and welfare of the world in which we live, and I think this is very much a two-way process. I just want to finish by saying this is now my last month as chair of PRI. I've been there for 4 years. I've got 2 board members present, Paul and Georg Kell. Paul is usually there on behalf of Achim Steiner from the UN Environmental Programme, and Georg from the UN Global Compact. So if I've said anything wrong, you can come up and kick me about it later. But thank you very much.
Donald, thank you very much indeed for that passionate exposition. I was looking at Georg then, and I thought we were both about to get a gift from BT Pension Funds, but that's fine. Look, the panelists have put it pretty straightforward, and I'm going to come to the audience in a couple of minutes in terms of questions or comments. But I like the fact that Chairman Geng started with the important role of a stock exchange in terms of developing the social fabric and channeling funds into broader society in a way that it obviously rewards productive companies but builds the social fabric and environmental integrity of society. And Donald, at the end, you made it very clear from the institutional investors' side that there is a larger role there. I think the universal owner theory is maybe something people are familiar with. Just one question directly for Chairman Geng and Michelle comes off the back of what Rani said. You made an explicit request that stock markets should cooperate in terms of creating some form of benchmark where you begin to look around the globe. Is this something that the Shanghai Stock Exchange and the Luxembourg Stock Exchange might welcome? Just brief answers would be good.
目前呢，国际交易所有一个国际组织叫 WFE， 这个组织呢已经成立了50年了。今年是 WFE 国际交易所联合会成立50周年。50年来，国际交易所联合会 WFE 的秘书长是小会长 ，WFE 副秘书长这个会长。这个对于交易所的规范发展，对于推进交易所加强监管，做了很多工作。但是呢，对于交易所发展的评估体系，到现在呢还没有做出来。我们希望通过这次会议传达的信息，同时我们也希望在今年10月份。WFE 50周年的纪念会上， 能以它为契机，逐步考虑建立交易所的评估体系。现在对交易所的评估主要是评市值、交易量、融资量和上市公司的数量，这4个指标，主要是这4个指标。这4个指标呢，我觉得都是自然的指标，都是自然的指标。交易所在履行社会责任，在推进上市公司履行社会责任这一方面的工作，并没有，或者说还没有纳入评价体系。
Michelle, brief answer.
Maybe a few words about Europe in particular, because there we have the European framework being more still further designed and defined, and we are participating very actively in dialogue with the authorities to develop this. And on plus, you have a dialogue between Europe and the United States still to further deepen collaboration and finding common rules in this respect. So there are different levels in which we are working, and I think that already the dialogue US and Europe is of extreme importance, adding this and the dimension Chairman Gang was mentioning.
So Rani, I think we've got a plan. Good. Right, let's go out to the audience. Hybrid best, is it all working perfectly, everybody's happy and there's no problems, or where does the regulatory piece lie? So if you could introduce yourself, your institution, a quick pointed question or a quick pointed comment, and I'd like the microphones to move quite quickly. Best question gets a bottle of UN champagne, right, Gil? Should we do that? Yes, he's agreed. Okay. The gentleman in the red tie, and then our friend here in the front. If you could introduce yourself, and the microphones, let's have them moving around the room. If you can make it to a specific person, that would be helpful also.
Yeah, my name is Thomas Recke Consultant based in Singapore. One question to Malaysia. What happens with a company that makes false or misleading statements in the sustainability report?
Okay, let's hold that question. We'll come back. And another microphone here.